Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, a safe space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a 19-year-old son, Joey, who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Julie Dixon Jackson, a Southern California-based adoptee from the baby scoop era. She was born in Australia and adopted into the U.S. She spent more than 25 years searching for her biological origins, and the last piece was put in place thanks to genealogy using DNA. As an adoptee who has struggled to find the truth of her family origins, she's particularly empathetic when she helps other adoptees find their origins in her career as a genetic genealogist, or Gen Genie, as she calls it. She also helps all kinds of people who are surprised by DNA, including NPEs, or not parent expected, and donor-conceived people find their origins. As of today, she has solved around 300 cases. Julie's company is called CutOff Genes Investigations, and she also has a podcast called CutOff Genes that covers all sorts of topics related to DNA, especially in the adoption context. So thank you for being with us on Unraveling Adoption, Julie. Glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Beth.
Yeah, and you're my first genealogist on the show.
Yay!
Yay! And I am fascinated by your job and want to hear all about what you do. But first, why don't you just give us a brief intro into your own adoption story?
Okay. So I'm a baby scoop era baby, as you have already told your listeners. I was born in Australia in 1965. I wasn't adopted to the U.S. I was actually raised in Australia till I was 15.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Then my adoptive family moved here.
Oh, okay.
My mother was American. My adoptive mother was American. So the whole family moved back here when I was 15. Found my biological mother. In Australia, the laws changed to where you could get your adoption information in 1983 or 4.
Oh, okay.
And so I was able to get my identifying information at that time. So I knew my mother's name, and I found her basically using the phone. I made a lot of international phone calls to find her, and it was very easy. That was when I discovered that I happened to have a weird skill of finding just about anybody.
Wow.
I'm pretty good at it. So, and that was when I was 22, and I went back to Australia. We had a reunion. It was relatively easy and straightforward, and moved on with my life, stayed in touch with her and that side of my family. I'd asked about my father, and I knew his name. She had warned me that he hadn't been interested at the time, so he probably wouldn't be very happy to hear from me.
Okay.
But, she didn't tell me I couldn't try to contact him. But at that point, I wasn't interested, just because we always think of who is our mother, and we don't put it together that this is a whole person thing.
Yeah.
So after I had my first child when I was 33, that was my first, what we call coming out of the fog. Moment where I had this realization of how much my daughter and I needed each other. It was a physical necessity, and I couldn't have her out of my sight. I was the only one who knew how to comfort her, to make her feel safe. And it was very much an aha moment for me, like,
wow,
holy crap. And then I realized that I had been in what was called the Methodist Babies Home for the first 2 months of my life.
Okay.
So I had been taken from my biological mother immediately after birth. She'd never gotten to hold me.
Oh, wow.
Then I'd been sent to this orphanage type place where I was probably tended to, but I'm sure there was no nurturing. I'm sure I didn't bond with anybody.
Sure.
And my parents were very upfront when I asked them, what was it like when you brought me home? And they said, we used to call you the blob.
Oh, you shut down.
Yeah, because I was literally a silent baby. I was already in shock. I had PTSD. I knew not to cry because I knew nothing would come of it.
Some people would think, oh, she's such a good baby.
Absolutely. I was a good baby because I wanted for nothing.
Yeah.
I had already taught myself to self-soothe, and that this is all I'm going to get. And I should not expect it from anybody else, which has pretty much been the theme of my life. I'm a fiercely independent person now, and I'm sure the root of that is my birth.
Of course. Yeah. How can it not?
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
That totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
So that was the first coming out of the fog. And that was when I started thinking, I think I need to finish this equation. I need to find out who my paternal side is. Mm-hmm. So I went back to searching for him. This is before DNA. This was in the late 90s. And I went searching for him. Of course, he was in Australia too. He had a relatively common name. And I just couldn't find him.
Okay.
I followed so many. I was so desperate, I would literally reach out to people with the same last name.
Okay. And just go down the phone book or
right,
whatever.
Exactly. So it didn't really get anywhere. I joined Ancestry years and years ago because I love genealogy, ironically. As an adoptee, it's ironic to love genealogy. And that is where I got all my information and thought that I would try to find him that way. Never really worked. And then I did my DNA in 2013, and there was nobody with his last name in the matches. But of course, it was Australia, and there weren't many Australian testers at the time. Yep. But still, I knew nothing about DNA at that time. Okay. So I just kept reaching out to anybody with that name or had that name in their tree, especially if they were a DNA match. My matches were very low at that time. Okay.
Like seventh cousin or something like that?
Like, I think the closest was probably fourth to sixth.
Okay.
Nothing was over 100 centimorgans, which is about, that's about a third cousin.
Okay. That's pretty distant.
So, or it could be a third cousin. It could be any variety of things, but nothing that, especially as somebody who didn't know what they were doing, would be able to figure anything out.
Maybe nowadays you could figure it out.
I have found many people with a third cousin match, actually, but things have changed a lot. So one day I reached out to somebody in Australia who happened to have that name in her tree again, just randomly reaching out saying, this is who I was told my grandparents were. I can't find anything about them. I'm looking, blah, blah, blah. And she happened to be an accomplished genealogist. And so she just randomly looked something up and found my biological paternal grandparents' marriage record that I had never been able to find.
Good job. Wow.
So she knew something that I didn't, obviously, at the time. So I all of a sudden knew my grandmother's maiden name, which
that's crucial.
Blew it open. So I now had another name to research. And I, as is my way, I did it 24/7 until I figured it out, until I found a relative of my grandmother and reached out to them. They knew my father. And long story short, I found my father.
Okay. And was that a good reunion? Mixed or bad?
I had half siblings, one of who I really connected with, that was really there for me. And I was able to genealogically build the tree back as far as I could. And I knew all these things about all these different branches of the family before I was able to go there and actually have a reunion with 5 different branches of the family.
Nice.
So I flew there. I met my father. He was not a great person. I'll be honest. Not a great guy. I knew the moment I spoke to him, like within 5 minutes, I knew that he was a sociopath or some kind of a pathological liar type person.
Wow. Okay.
And when I spoke to my sister, she confirmed that.
Did you steer clear of him then when you went, or did you meet him?
I had to meet him in person once.
Okay.
I had to. I'd spoken to him on the phone several times. Each time was more frustrating than the last.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, now I just need to do this to get it done.
Yeah.
So that I can say I did it.
Yeah.
So I met with him for about 2 hours. My sister came with me.
Okay, good.
And it was enough. It was fine. He gave me an album of family pictures, which was amazing. He also told me his version of the story with my mother, which was, of course, was that he didn't know. But then his mother had told him that she was pregnant, but it wasn't his, and that she had had a little boy, blah, blah, blah. I knew at this point already not to believe anything he said anyway.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So while I was there, I took a sample of his DNA just because I needed to complete it. My mother had done her DNA. I needed his DNA so I could have both my parents' DNA, and then my matches will be able to make sense.
Now, when you say took a sample, did he do it willingly, or did you like trim his hair or something?
No. I was a 23andMe test at the time.
There's ethical issues around that, right? You can't just like take someone's DNA.
Yes, there are ethical issues around it. If somebody definitely does not want you to take their DNA, you really have no right to demand it. So
unless you're like doing forensics research as a cop or something.
yes, and have some kind of a legal backing.
Okay, gotcha.
For that. But we've actually covered this on my podcast a few times, that people are talking about once a loved one has died, of having the funeral home collect some saliva. And that's not ethically sound, I don't think.
Okay. They can't consent.
I think the general consensus is that's not ethically sound, especially if they told you in life they weren't interested in giving you their DNA.
That's taking advantage, I would say, too. Yeah.
Yes. Although I am on the side of truth, it's hard for me to admit that, I think that's unethical.
There's a line. Yeah. There's a line there somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had this 23andMe kit, and I took his DNA and I did the rest of my trip, and it was a great trip. I met my grandmother's last living sister, and it was really an amazing trip. Nice. Got back to Australia, sent the DNA in New Year's of that year. That was 2014. His results came in, and he was not my father.
What? No way. Well,
yeah.
Were you like, that guy was a jerk?
Yes, it was kind of a relief, but also, holy crap, the amount of time and money I spent on it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's no small thing to be traveling to Australia.
Yes, it was a big trip. It was a big trip, and I'd spent hours and hours and hours on this family. So anyone who was in that family now has a very complete, well-researched tree if they want it. If you're a Cummings or a Brunt from Adelaide or Victoria, Australia, hit me up. Anyway, so I went through the initial thing of thinking it was a mistake at first, and contacting 23andMe and calling my mother. And she said, no, there's never been anybody else, and blah, 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 blah. And when I spoke to 23andMe, the first thing they said was, I'm very sorry you found out this way. So they've heard that many, many times, because they hear people saying, something's wrong, you made a mistake.
Yes.
And they have to say, yeah, we don't make mistakes.
So your mother was like the Virgin Mary or something? Like
that is what it felt like for a long time. So then I called her and I said, this is weird, but Malcolm is not my dad. The DNA says Malcolm is not my dad. And she said, that is weird. And I said, do you have anything else to say? And she's like, no, there was never anybody else. I'm like, except John, who was her husband. And she said, yeah, but the dates are off for that. And I said, well, maybe they're not. Maybe you made a mistake. Yeah. Maybe you had a miscarriage and then got pregnant again. I don't know. Yeah. And suddenly things started to make sense, because I realized that, so I'm 5'3". Okay. I was always the smallest kid at school. I was just, the fact that I'm 5'3" is amazing, because I expected to not be over 5 feet. Okay. My mother, my biological mother, was 5'9.5". Whoa. And Malcolm was over 6 feet.
Okay. So you're like, how did I come out of those?
And I'm like, why did I not question this? That, and the fact that we did not, I could not, people said that I looked like my grandmother, his mother, only because she had blonde hair and wore glasses. I don't think our features looked like each other, whatever. And then it occurred to me, her husband, John, is barely taller than me. Oh. I'm like, oh, for heaven's sake. So then I decided in my mind that they had thought that I was somebody else's child and gave up their child. Oh, no. And I had this intact family. So I went off that belief for a while I sent them a DNA test. Okay. Thinking that it would come back that he was my father. Okay. Came back, he was not my father.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh dear. So what happened?
So I grilled her over and over again, asking her so many questions about, what about this person? And it was always, I had this boyfriend and this boyfriend and this boyfriend. I never had sex with any of them. She was very, very adamant that she was not promiscuous, and she never drank. Okay. She was very
I was going to say, maybe when she was blacked out or something, she doesn't remember, but.
And that is a reasonable assumption. But the fact that she kept insisting that she didn't drink, and I'm like, why is she? I don't care if she drank. Yeah. Oh, okay. She would tell me stories of ex-boyfriends that she said she didn't sleep with. But I took that as hints, and I started hunting down people to see if I could get a sample from one of their relatives to see if this is how desperate I was.
Wow.
And this is how I needed to finish this. I had started this and I thought I was finished, but now it was like my life's goal.
Yeah. All consuming.
Yes. So there were at least 2 other people that she had told me stories about, people she had associated with, one that she had dated and one that she went to a party with, but insisted that there was no alcohol.
Okay.
Like she actually in the message said, we just went over there for soft drinks. It was
a party with no alcohol.
Yeah.
That's suspect.
Right.
Okay.
And these guys were football players. So, So I just took that as a hint. And I had nothing else to go on. So I tracked down relatives of both of those people. And I did not lie to them, but I did omit the reason that I needed their DNA.
Okay.
I said, I have a reason to believe I am related to this family. And I'm wondering if this family is your family.
Okay.
So that's not a lie.
No.
I mean, I can justify it in that respect. And those 2 people both sent me DNA.
Okay, nice.
Neither of them were related to me.
Shoot.
But I went as far as sending DNA kits to complete strangers.
Wow. Okay.
So that is when I started getting into genetic genealogy. I joined all of the pages. I followed Cece Moore, who is my mentor, and just got to a point where I realized that I wasn't going to know until a close enough DNA match came in.
Oh, okay.
So I had to bide my time. While I was biding my time, I was learning how to do genetic genealogy.
Okay.
So one day I got a second cousin match.
Oh, ooh, that's close.
Yes.
Okay.
And that broke everything wide open. And the person who had done the DNA, it was actually the wife of a cousin, who I now know is the wife of a cousin. And it was his DNA, and she's interested in genealogy. So she was absolutely open to sharing it.
Okay, nice.
And within a few weeks, a few days, I did have a genetic genealogist, a more experienced genetic genealogist, really talk me through it about what I was looking at and how to build out the tree. My own case was literally my first proving that this is how this works.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we narrowed, me and this genetic genealogist who was based in Australia. She talked me through it. We broke it down to, it has to be one of these 2 brothers.
Okay. Okay.
And the son of one of those brothers was on Facebook. In fact, I had stalked his Facebook page. And funny, before I even knew who he was, because he's a cousin of the cousin that I matched, obviously. And so he was there as a friend.
Okay.
Something you just do as a genealogist is you find people on Facebook and whatever is public there, you look at, because this is how you find out about people and who are their friends and who's their family and what, So I had seen his page and I'd looked at all these pictures, and there was something about him that clicked with me.
Okay. Maybe you saw yourself in his picture?
I thought he looked kind of Italian. I didn't think we looked alike, really. But the way he talked and the way he talked about his family and just the way he wrote felt familiar.
Familiar. Wow, that's so wild.
And so when I found out that he was the son of one of my potential fathers, I was like, oh my God, I've been zeroing in on him without even realizing.
Wow.
So then I reached out to him and I told him the whole story. I wrote a blog about it. So I sent him to the blog to read it and to catch him up as to where I was and to where now basically he was my first cousin or my half brother.
Wow.
And when we got to that point, he said, well, there's only one way to find out.
Okay.
Send me the test.
Okay. Nice.
So I sent him the test, and long story short, it took like 6 weeks, but it came back and he was my half sibling.
Oh, wow.
So I now knew who my father was. I will say that it was not as cut and dried as you normally think it should be, because it was on the cusp. It was a lower level match.
Okay.
So to be a half sibling, it's usually between 1,300 and 2,000 centimorgans, what we call centimorgans, which is a measurement of DNA.
Okay.
And he matched me at that time at 1,335.
Okay.
And there is sometimes some overlap
to
first cousins. So he could have been possibly an outlier of a first cousin.
Okay.
So it wasn't cut and dried, which was very difficult because we couldn't 100% celebrate.
Ugh.
I went back to my experienced genetic genealogist. There's one named Leah LaPearl Larkin, who is an amazing science-based genetic genealogist. I mean, she's a master's. And she knew somebody in England who has developed an analysis, a DNA analysis technique that I will never understand, that basically proved, it's a clustering thing, but basically proved that he is my half brother instead of my first cousin. So it took a few days for that.
That's amazing. That's amazing that people can do that. I don't understand.
I know, isn't it?
At all.
I know.
Yeah. Now, did your dad turn out to be nicer than the original one you thought?
My dad passed away in 2009, unfortunately.
So you never got to meet him.
I never got to meet him.
But was he a good person though?
He, as far as I can tell, he was amazing.
Oh.
I am so lucky in that, I have my brother who loved him so much and has such wonderful stories of him, has so many pictures. I have video of my father now and stories of him. But the really cool thing is that my grandfather in the 60s, when he would get letters from his children, he would transpose them into books.
Oh,
I know. And he would keep them. So I have a cousin who has all of those books.
Wow.
And they are transcriptions of letters that my father wrote my grandfather.
Oh,
in the 60s.
What a treasure. Oh my goodness.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Yes. So I have these little novels, these little slices of life where he talks like me, he writes like me, he had, you know what I mean? I can tell who he is by the way he relates to his father or the way he expresses himself.
Wow, that genetic mirroring.
So it's an amazing, amazing thing to have. Yes, absolutely.
Even not just your face, but just your behaviors.
The way your mind works.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow, what a wonderful story and a pretty good outcome.
Absolutely.
You know, it would have been nice if he was still living, but...
Yes, I would have loved if he was still living, absolutely. But I now know everything about my own genetic history. Everything, going back to the 1700s.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
Both sides.
I bet you kept going then.
Of course I did. Yes. So now and I always tell people that when I was a kid, I was never interested in history class.
Okay.
And I think it is because I couldn't place myself in it.
Yeah, you had no history. Yeah.
I didn't know which of these people to root for or who you know what I mean? I had no clue. It's like you're floating. It's like you're not connected to anything.
I try to imagine what that must be like for adoptees. I can't imagine what it would be like, but I'm guessing it would just feel so disconnected and just like you're flailing about, just like wandering through space and not being anchored into anything.
Yes. It feels like there is no truth to who, except for, and here's something that I think that is what you do. And I want more adoptive parents to think about that is listen to your children. They will tell you who they are.
Ah, yes.
Their most deeply lived instincts are already in there.
Yes.
And as much as I loved my adoptive parents, it was baby scoop era. They were told that I was a blank slate.
Yep.
Yes. And that they could mold me into being whatever they wanted me to be.
Gosh.
And by the time they realized that wasn't true, it was too late to send me back. But instead of listening to my instincts and what I knew about myself and what was my deepest truth about what I wanted to do with my life, they continued to invalidate me. And because I was not like them and they could not relate to me.
Okay. So you're so sparkly and vibrant. Was your adoptive family like that? Or did you kind of stick out in that way?
Absolutely. I stuck out in that way.
Yeah.
The differences between me and my family are so exaggerated that it's almost like it was made up.
Wow. Like some sort of TV show or something.
It's like, you have got to be kidding me that this is where you came from.
Wow.
And they're not bad people. They were polar opposites of me in every respect.
Wow.
Yes.
That must have been just so suppressing.
It was confusing.
Yeah.
It was confusing. And it was a childhood of anxiety and masking and pretending and keeping secrets. and not feeling safe.
Yeah. Oof, that's not good.
Yeah.
I don't want to dig too deeply into your dark past, but did that create, my son's struggling with addiction and with mental health issues and just sort of self-destructive behavior in general? Did that create that in you, or did you kind of overachieve to overcome it, or what did you do?
I was that part. I was that.
The overachiever.
I'm going to do everything I can to. So I knew at a very early age that I was a performer.
Okay.
That I wanted to sing and dance.
Yeah.
I knew that.
Yeah.
That was what was in me. It was my deepest instincts. And that was not going to be acceptable in my family.
What were they into?
Sports.
Ugh.
Sports. Exactly.
Coming from a musical person
over here.
Oh, jeez.
Yes.
Oh, no.
So they were very, very conservative, very much, we don't take up space. We don't want people looking at us. We don't want, confidence is a deficit.
Oh, no.
I think, it's much more important to know your place and not try to make waves. And it very much, oh gosh, I have so many stories that illustrate.
I bet you're just a fish out of water.
It was so clear that they did not think I was special.
Yep.
And that I shouldn't think I was special, and I should be thankful for whatever I got.
Yeah.
And for them, the biggest measure of success was finding somebody who will marry me and take care of me.
Of course.
Because I was clearly hopeless.
Oh, no. Were you in high school theater productions and that kind of thing?
I sang all the time as a child.
Okay.
But my brother would tell me to shut up all the time because he was just a horrible person. And I just couldn't sing out loud. The only time I could sing out loud full voice was when my mother was vacuuming. And I would follow her around the house and sing as loud as I could because I could sing and no one would tell me to shut up because there was already another noise.
That makes me so sad.
And to this day, whenever I'm vacuuming, when I turn off the vacuum, I get a sinking feeling because that was my safe place, where I could be exactly who I am and nobody was going to tell me to be quiet or judge me.
And singing is so personal.
Singing is everything. To me, singing is who I am.
Yeah.
I am a singer. I will always be a singer.
Yeah.
So I was not allowed to take dance class, which I also wanted to do, but that wasn't practical because I didn't look like a dancer. So what was the point in taking dance?
Oh, because you were small?
Because I was little and I wasn't.
You weren't leggy and
Yes.
ballerina type. Okay. Because that's the only type of dancers.
Apparently, yes. So I wasn't allowed to do that. I never took singing lessons, but I just had a natural talent for it. Thank God. But it was just not something that was acknowledged. It wasn't until I was in 10th grade that I was finally allowed to. This is when I was still in Australia. I was allowed to audition for the school musical.
Okay.
For the first time. So I went and I sang out loud for the first time.
Wow. How did that feel?
I actually went in with a girlfriend because we said we want to audition together because we're scared. And we started singing I Don't Know How to Love Him as a duet. And halfway through, they told her to stop singing and told me to keep singing.
Oh, ouch.
Yikes. Yeah. She never really did get over that.
I bet.
So I got the role of Adelaide in Guys and Dolls.
Whoa, that's the lead role, if anyone is wondering.
Lead role. And I was elated. And I ran home so excited to tell my parents. And they were like, that's great.
Oh, no. Oh.
That's great. Okay. And they didn't say, oh, no.
Okay.
But what they did do was not invite anybody to the performance because they thought I was going to humiliate them.
Shoot. But they came,
and a really close friend of the family who was very understanding came.
Oh.
And, but my grandmother didn't come. My cousins didn't come. It was because they were genuinely afraid that I was going to embarrass them.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I didn't embarrass them. And they actually admitted, oh, you can sing.
Whoa, you're good. Okay.
Yeah, no kidding.
Goodness.
And it changed my life in that I was finally validated for what I do, what I can do. And I knew at that moment, that's what I want to do with my life.
Wow.
And then 3 months later, we left Australia and came to the US and I had to start all over again. But yeah, that was a very pivotal time. But my parents, while they agreed that I had a good singing voice, it was still never feasible that I would be able to do anything with that professionally.
But you did, didn't you?
That's all I did.
Yeah, that's what you did.
So I spent the remainder of their lives trying to prove myself worthy. just to them. They were the only audience I cared about, and they never, ever accepted it.
Oh, that hurts so bad.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer because I loved them. And I understood years and years ago that they are who they are and they don't know how to nurture.
Yeah.
And they just don't even want to try to. I don't know. I'm never going to be able to put into words how much I get that they didn't understand, but at the same time, how painful it is that they didn't understand. I'm aware of their ignorance, but it's very difficult to move forward. And what I'm trying to do now is to move forward.
Yeah. It's like they speak a different language. Like you spoke the language of music and they spoke the language of sport, but you can learn another language. You can work on it.
More than one thing can be true.
Yeah. You can enjoy both things. You can dig in and learn and support and provide teachers and
yes, you can. You can nurture without completely understanding what it is, but because they couldn't relate to it, they didn't see it as
didn't value it. Oh gosh, that really hurts. But you still did the thing, and you
did the thing.
You did
I did the thing more than they ever imagined.
I bet.
But they still never validated it. It was still, but.
When are you going to get a real job? Did you get that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I got that a lot, and it was funny because they thought that when a show would close and I was unemployed, that I had difficulty keeping jobs. I didn't realize it's because the show closed. I didn't get fired.
Yeah. Oh,
but they saw that as not as, I granted it's a terrible industry. I mean, it's not something that is recommended if you don't have to do it. Certainly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. My teacher would say, do this only if it's the only thing that you want to do. Exactly. That's absolutely true.
Which for me at that time was the only thing I wanted to do. And it was the only, and I had something to prove at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went that direction. You did not go self-destruct. You went
hypervigilance, first of all.
Hypervigilance.
Yes, I'm very hypervigilant. Have always been, will always be. And just balls to the wall. I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
And it never works. So that's what is so useless about having that kind of attitude about trying to impress somebody that is not going to be impressible.
Yeah. And you can't control them. You can't shake them and say, God, they either will or they won't. And it's so sad that they didn't. Dang it.
Yeah.
But you still love your music and it still fills your heart, I'm sure, right?
Yes. I mean, I don't do it professionally anymore. I do some recording sometimes, which is wonderful. I haven't been on stage in years though. And I do miss singing, and I miss the endorphins that I got from singing.
Oh, it's like a drug, honestly.
Yes. It's a physical thing. And I wish I need to find more ways to do that, I think. So working on that.
Yeah. I started drumming when my son was having trouble. I started taiko drumming because he's Japanese. So I wanted to connect with his Japanese heritage. And so I wanted him to do it with me, but then he didn't think it was cool because I was doing it. But that's okay. But it has been amazing. Highly recommend drumming.
I love that.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. It gets all your yayas out, and it's musical, but different than my music that I typically do. And it's all by ear. So it's fresh and new, and it's physical and wonderful.
Don't you love it when you find a new passion?
So great.
That's great. That's amazing.
Well, it's so cool to hear your story. And as a musician, I totally get you. Totally understand.
Yes.
So I want to talk about your genealogy work now.
Okay.
So from 21, you started looking into it, right? 21 or early 20s?
Well, it was when I started doing just regular
the old-fashioned
genealogy. Yeah, but I didn't really know what I was doing.
Okay.
And I also didn't want to put any money towards it, because another thing I was raised with was, if something wasn't 100% necessary or a proven investment, you shouldn't spend money on it.
Oh, okay.
So I was raised by also the two cheapest people in the world. So I have issues with money as well, just with forgiving myself for spending things on myself.
Oh, gosh. Yes. Go get that pedicure. It's okay.
Yes.
It's okay.
Oh, you don't need that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Don't need dance lessons,
Right. Just dance in the hallway. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I dabbled in just regular genealogy from then. it wasn't until I started looking for my father that I really started learning.
Kind of caught the bug.
To do it. Yes.
Okay.
And it became a daily thing.
What year do you remember when 23andMe and Ancestry, all those DNA kits became kind of mainstream? When was that?
So I think 23andMe was like 2007, 2008.
Okay.
And then Ancestry was like 2013.
Oh, okay. Quite a bit later.
So 23andMe was first, and it was very much touted as a health thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't about relative matching.
Okay.
It was, you could do relative matching, but you couldn't build trees and stuff on 23andMe.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
So, but Ancestry built the trees for you. And
right. So no, they don't build the trees for you, but you have the tree building capabilities.
A software.
And the research capabilities within that, as long as you are a paid member.
Sure.
So that's where I did almost everything. And I don't know why I tested at 23andMe first, because I think it's because they advertised more.
That's the one I know.
And I thought I would get more matches on there.
Oh,
exactly. Whereas, but the far larger, by like exponentially larger, is Ancestry as far as the database goes. Around the world.
So is that the test that you send out to people when you're helping people?
That is the test that I insist people take first.
Because it's the most.
Because it is by far the most successful.
It all depends on how many people in your neck of the woods take the test. Like there's areas in Asia and other places that is very low. So
yes. So if you were born in India or anywhere in the Far East, it's going to be virtually impossible to find somebody using an Ancestry DNA test or a 23andMe.
Is it culturally a taboo, or why are they?
I think possibly. Possibly. There are some countries where, like, it's not legal in France to do a DNA test.
Really? Not legal?
Yeah. Because, and they cite it as saying it has potential to upset families.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah, no kidding. But people who do test in France get the test from other countries.
Yeah.
But it is not recognized as something you can do in France.
So it's really for Europe minus France and America and Australia, sounds like.
Yep. It's expanding every year. But Russia, you can't, obviously there's not much in the database. But it's just people who have ended up here that have Russian roots. But yeah, I will take clients, even clients with Hispanic backgrounds are much more difficult. Puerto Rico is difficult. I've taken cases, or I've solved cases that one parent is from Puerto Rico. It's far more difficult because Puerto Rico is an island nation, therefore it has endogamy. Endogamy is when the DNA skews much higher because everybody is distantly related to each other because they're an isolated population. Yeah. And also Latin American naming traditions make it difficult as well because the names are so long. So in one way, it's helpful because usually a part of a child's name, the mother's maiden name, is within their name as well. So once you understand those, it can be helpful. But the names are very, very common. Like it's the same 5 names.
Maria Juan.
Right. So it can be more difficult. It is absolutely easiest to solve cases in the continental United States, obviously, because this is where I have the search capabilities. This is where most people are. If they're from here, that is, Canadian is difficult because the privacy laws are different there. Australia is difficult because of the privacy laws as well. But if you get close enough matches, you can do it. So it depends. And
it's just all kind of a numbers game, right?
Yes, it's a numbers game, and it depends on, even if you have close matches, but they aren't identified, you can have a half sibling on there that never logs on and doesn't identify themselves that can sit there for years and years and years.
You guys have to be so patient because it takes 6 weeks just for the DNA test to come back. God, how do you?
And I'm an incredibly impatient person. So for me, I feel so bad when I do have a client that has paid for my services and I've gone as far as I can. I never, ever give up on a case. It's always open until it's solved.
Because somebody else might do a DNA test.
Because people test every day. But I feel for people who I have gotten as far as I can. And this is all the information that's available to me today. But I look at every open case. I look at again every week, usually every day, actually, because I'm there all the time, just to see if there's a new match. And sometimes things we do what I call the long game. And sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes an hour. Sometimes it takes a week. Wow. You just never know.
It just depends. Yes. Wow. Well, at least now with DNA, there's a chance. Before there really was no chance if you didn't have the data.
DNA has changed the face of being an adoptee.
Yeah.
People can't tell us that we'll never know anymore.
Yeah. And there's no more privacy for the birth parents that wanted to just let this lie. Don't say anything. La, 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 la.
No secrets.
That's all secrets. Gone. That's all
I'm
gone.
hoping that people are realizing that because so often you will see, and I have a real soft spot for biological mothers, especially during the baby scoop era, because they were treated so poorly.
Yeah.
And
they were
coerced and told that they were terrible people and to go home and pretend it never happened. So that has been a source of shame for them from the beginning. Yeah. And many of them have taken it to their graves, and many of them have thought they were going to take it to their graves. And then somebody like me shows up and breaks all that open, and they haven't told their children yet. And they think that if they do tell their children will judge them and the dynamic of their family is going to change forever. But what they don't realize is, I would say 99% of the time in cases that I work, the children are overjoyed that they have a half sibling and so relieved that this is out because it explains so much about their parents.
Oh, I bet. Because the kids weren't raised in that same soup of secrecy. Yes. So the kids aren't going to be shamed about that.
Yes, and it's a different time. Yes, exactly. And it varies. I have on my father's side of the family, I have 3 brothers and a sister. The sister does not acknowledge me, but she also doesn't really acknowledge, like she didn't acknowledge my father either. She left home very early.
Okay.
So you're going to have that, but I don't think that it has anything to do with adoption. I think that it has to do with people's personalities.
Yeah. Now, do you help the adoptees' kind of emotional state once the reunion happens, or is that you pass them off to somebody else at that point?
I try to. That's one of the reasons I used to work for a private investigator. And one of the reasons why I no longer work with him is that he very much looked at it as solving a case and moving on, and thought that solving the case is going to give the adoptee closure.
I'm guessing they weren't an adoptee.
No, not an adoptee, and did not speak kindly about adoptees or biological mothers. Me being an adoptee had a problem with that.
That's
tough. Not really open to listening to the voices of adoptees, such as his employee that turned his company around by bringing in genetic genealogy.
Wow.
He could be abusive and speak very poorly about clients and biological mothers who were not in a place. And he also insisted on cold calling biological mothers, which I never recommend.
Like saying, hey, we have your birth child over here without like a cushion or...
Yes. The first thing I tell my clients, well, first of all, it's generally believed within the community, within the adoptee community and genetic genealogy community, that the first contact should come from the adoptee.
Okay. Not from some private investigator.
Yes. From a private investigator, especially one who doesn't really care about people's,
is not empathetic. Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it happened a lot.
So the adoptee should be the first.
Right. So that should be the first thing. In my case, I tell the adoptee to start, even when we start the case before we've even, solved it, I tell them to start thinking about a letter that they would like to write to that person and say all the things that they would like to say, assuming that they're not going to hear from them, but things that they've always wanted to know or wanted them to know.
Okay.
Being very neutral, letting them know that they were okay and that they we're open to connecting with them, but not insisting on connecting with them. Just saying all the right things so as not to freak the biological home.
So you don't want the door to slam shut on you, right?
You want to make the best first impression. And the best way to do that is in the written word.
Okay.
You don't want them to be in a room with other people that don't know about this and the color drains from their face and they don't know what to do with it. When I did do cold calls with this company, I would get hung up on regularly. And I did not like that. I help them to write a letter. I will edit it for them. I will say, maybe say this, or maybe put it this way, include pictures of yourself. Say, I help them with that. Then I will find where this person lives. And if it's a publicly known address, I will let them know what the address is. If it's an address that I found like when I worked for the private investigator, I had access to addresses that the general public does not. So I couldn't give that address out, but I could send a letter using that address. So I could be an intermediary in that respect. Right.
Okay.
It was for legal reasons. And that works best for me. And that works best in most cases because it gives them an opportunity to read it, throw it down, be shocked, but then calm down and come back and read it again.
Because a conversation on the phone, you can't get back again. Yes, that's very important because it's like when you're at the doctor, you can't hear what they're saying.
Yes.
You need someone to take notes for you.
You should record it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So a letter, that sounds much smarter.
Yeah. And I understand people wanting to call because of the whole impatience thing.
The voice. Yeah.
And also you don't know who's going to get it. There's also certain, like people say, I send a registered letter. I would not send a registered letter. Because I don't want to send up a red flag for anybody else in that household.
Yeah. Oh, this looks super important. Did you commit a crime or something?
So I don't do that. Yeah. What I have come to do, and I think is rather clever, I'll get a greeting card. So it looks like a card for, and other members of a household are less likely to open somebody else's greeting card.
Oh, right.
So it'll be something like congratulations, or, if it's around their birthday, great.
Yeah.
But then I'll put the letter in that. And I'll usually include a letter from me explaining how I arrived at my conclusion and why I think that they are so the jig is up, basically.
Yeah.
And, I explain your cousin so-and-so tested and this cousin so-and-so tested, which shows that your parents are my client's grandparents. So,
Wow. And then you stay with the adoptee, your client, as long as they need
I will take calls from my clients anytime. If they need follow-up stuff. I'm obviously not a psychologist, but I'm someone who has lived it and I've experienced it so much with other clients. And the most important thing as far as counseling your clients is to have them manage their expectations in the beginning and to understand that there's going to be a honeymoon period if and when there's a reunion. And it's a roller coaster.
Well, I think you provide such an amazing service because obviously you are clued in, you're empathetic, you have done it yourself, you understand that sense of loss and you can totally get it. Are all of your clients adoptees or do you do regular genealogy?
I do regular genealogy using DNA. I insist that everybody takes a DNA test because that's how you get the truth.
Yeah.
But yes, I take cases of people that just have questions that have brick walls, or they've always been told that their great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. No such thing, by the way, everybody. But, want to prove that, or just they don't know who their grandmother's parents were.
Okay.
And I solve cases like that as well. Or if they just want me to build a tree that is truer than if I did it without DNA, just as a genealogist, I do that too.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay, very good. And if people want to work with you, where do they find you?
They find me at cutoffgenes.com. That's all one word. And genes is Genes.
Yeah. I love the wordplay. Love the wordplay. And then you just start with a DNA test.
Start with a DNA test. I start with an analysis of their DNA, 3 or 4 hour analysis in which I really break it down and I can see how solvable it is. I can actually, I have solved cases just in that amount of time.
Wow.
But usually what will happen is I'll see that there's a lot to work with, in which case it'll become a whole case. And then I work it until I solve it.
Wow.
And all cases are not solvable. There are certain things that, depending on endogamy or from another country or not enough matches. So not everything is solvable, but a good percentage I have solved I would say out of the cases that I have had, maybe 3% have been not solved.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very good. That's very good.
And that I'm just pulling that out of thin air, but that's what it's. Most cases are solvable, but never are 100% of cases solved.
Sure. But it will get better and better every day because more people are taking tests. So
Absolutely.
Go take a DNA test, everyone. But beware, you might not be expecting what you get back.
Correct.
Well, thank you, Julie, for being with us. I learned a lot, and this is a fascinating area. And I get so confused, though. I can't keep cousins, and I like it like hurts my brain thinking about these relatives. Did it used to hurt your brain?
It still does. And we have charts to help us with things like that.
Just have charts.
The biggest misconception is that people think that your first cousin's children are your second cousins.
Okay. No.
You think that, or you don't know?
I don't know. I get so confused about that.
People think that their cousins' children are their second cousins. They're actually their first cousins once removed. People, once they start hearing the once removed thing, that is when people's eyes glaze over, and mine too. Like, frankly, what? until I figured it out, until I learned what it means.
Okay.
So the removed part of the equation has to do with the generational.
Oh, okay.
So your first cousin's children are from your first cousin, and they're a generation removed. So they're a first cousin once removed.
Sense.
Now they are second cousins to your children because they are the same generation.
Oh, the cousins have to be straight across.
It's the same generation. So the removed refers to generational.
Very good. Well, I admire what you're doing so much. And I also love your podcast. And not just because I was on it once, but I think it's very entertaining, and you make it really, really interesting. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work you're doing in adoption world to help adoptees.
I appreciate you as well, and what you are doing to flip the script on what it is like to be an adoptive parent. And I recommend you to every adoptive parent I know.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I am trying to change the world. That's all I'm trying to do.
No big deal.
Just do a little bit, my little piece of it to help move people forward a little bit.
I appreciate it. And we, all adoptees, I dare say, appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And of course. So go find Julie at CutOff Genes and follow Unraveling Adoption on social media. Our website is unravelingadoption.com, and we have a Patreon, patreon.com/unravelingadoption. If you'd like to support our show with a small amount once a month, Patreon makes it super easy to do so. And my group for adoptive parents, if you're wanting to help me change the world by helping adoptive parents be better parents for their kids, it's called Aptitude, a support group for adoptive parents facing adoption's challenges. Find all of that on our website, unravelingadoption.com. I think that's it. So thank you so much for listening. Please share this episode with others that you know. And Julie and I want you all to stay safe.